After 10 years of marriage without children, just when we had finally given up, my husband proposed that we move in with his parents. Apparently, my father-in-law's health was deteriorating, and my mother-in-law was reaching her limit with caregiving. However, I was not keen on the idea of living together. The main reason was the relationship between my husband and his mother. Mama? Oh, Eric there? My husband Eric calls his mother Mama and is always doting on her. In return, his mother calls him Sugar or Darling and dotes on him as if he were a child. But this same mother-in-law is always cold towards me. The uncomfortable closeness between my husband and his mother and her mean comments towards me made me reluctant to agree to live together. But my husband insisted. The situation turned out to be terrible. The only kind person, my father-in-law, passed away. On the night after the funeral, I was left alone. No, I'm having a baby with my favorite mama. Here you go, divorce papers. Dad's gone, and I already have no use for you. Well, divorce? No way. My statement left Eric in despair. My name is Tally. I'm a housewife in my 30s, working part-time. I married Eric, who was my coworker at a company I worked for in my 20s. Eric persistently pursued me, and despite my reservations about office romance, he guided me to marriage. His earnestness touched my heart, and before I knew it, I had fallen for him too. Our marriage started happily. I thought we would continue living a blissful life. But life doesn't always go as planned. Even after 10 years of marriage, we were unable to have children. Why can't we have a baby? We're getting to an age where a pregnancy would be considered high risk. I don't know the reason, but I don't think children are a must for our lives, so you don't need to worry, Tally. The risks of a high-risk pregnancy worry me more. We can consider giving up on having children. Having left my job upon getting married, I decided to start working part-time since we wouldn't be having children. Eric supported me in this decision, or so I thought. One day, after I had been working part-time for a while, Eric approached me with a serious tone, saying, "Tally, I need to talk to you about something serious." His unusually serious demeanor made me tense as I turned to face him. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "It's serious, but it's not sudden. Remember I told you that my dad's health has been declining? I had heard about his father's worsening health over time. Worried, I frowned. I remember. Did something happen to your father? His health is getting worse. My mom is taking care of him, but it's becoming too much for her. She's really struggling. I want us to move in and help her." Eric's words shocked me. His parents were a remarried couple with a 20-year age gap. His father was in his 60s, while his stepmother Jen was still in her 40s. Eric was raised by them. That wasn't the issue, though. The problem was Eric's attitude toward Jen. Despite not being biologically related, Eric calls her Mama, and she calls him Sugar or Darling, treating him like a child. While it might seem like a positive example of a blended family getting along, Jen's attitude towards me was awful. When Eric and I got engaged, Jen looked deeply displeased. Whenever I visited their home, she would glare at me with a harsh gaze and ignore my greetings. Jen's hostility wasn't just in her attitude, but also in her actions. Even during family gatherings, Jen would purposely neglect to prepare my portion of the meal. Once, when I stayed over at my in-laws' house and tried to take a bath, Jen spoke to me for the first time that day, and her words left me stunned. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm going to take a bath." "Who gave you permission?" "What? Why should we waste our money on heating water for a stranger like you?" "This isn't a free bathhouse. If you want to use the bath, you need to pay up." Jen said this while mocking me and never allowed me to use the bath. As a result, I couldn't even take a bath that night. Even so, Jen is still my mother-in-law. I made efforts to build a good relationship with her, but all my attempts were in vain. And Eric witnessed this. "Eric, you know your mom hates me, right? Living together is impossible. Impossible or not, if we don't move in, both Dad and Mom will end up collapsing from the stress. Your mom is a housewife and still in her 40s. She should be able to handle it. She's in the prime of her working years. Mom may be in her 40s, but she's fragile and doing her best. Everyone has their own limits. Don't just decide she can handle it based on your assumptions." I sighed, realizing I had triggered Eric's anger. His attitude towards me wasn't good either. The night I wasn't allowed to take a bath at my in-laws, I confided in Eric. "Eric, Jen said I couldn't use the bath because she didn't want to waste money on heating water for a stranger like me. Can't you persuade her?" "Huh. No way. To her, you're a stranger. It's a fact. Don't say such cruel things. I married into this family. Doesn't that make me family now? Enough. I'm tired." Eric dismissed my concerns with irritation, refusing to acknowledge my feelings, yet eagerly called out to Jen Mama whenever she appeared. "Oh, it's Sugar. Darling, there. Eric's attachment to Jen was excessive to the point where I questioned if their closeness was appropriate for a mother and son. Watching them made me reluctant to live together, but I couldn't outright refuse. Any concerns I voiced only fueled Eric's anger and frustration towards me. Eventually, I gave in, and we moved in together. The beginning of our life together was filled with apprehension. The only solace was my father-in-law, whom I had to care for. He ran a company and was always kind to me. "Thank you for deciding to live with us. I know it's a huge responsibility, and I'll do my best to help as much as I can." My father-in-law was an optimistic person, and talking with him always warmed my heart. I cared for him devotedly, but his condition worsened daily. Eventually, he became bedridden, and Eric took over the company his father had built. "This is the company I've nurtured. Take good care of it." "I know, Dad. I've worked all these years with that goal in mind." Eric spoke with pride as he took over the company, but I couldn't bring myself to celebrate his dream coming true because both Eric and Jen didn't take care of my stepfather at all. They shoved all the caregiving onto me and acted like it was completely normal. For example, one day, as I was in the middle of cooking, my stepfather called out for assistance. I quickly called out to my nearby mother-in-law, "Sorry, I'm frying food right now. Could you please go? My father-in-law is calling." "Huh? Why me? Caregiving isn't my job. It's yours. Do your own work. Useless," Jen replied without looking up from her phone. Despite her response, I was overwhelmed with all the housework, caregiving, and working part-time. I thought she could help just this once, but Jen showed no sign of moving. Desperately, I asked Eric, who happened to be nearby, "Hey Eric, my father-in-law seems to need help. Could you please assist him?" "I'm not going. I don't know anything about caregiving." "You always do it, so you do it," Eric retorted. "Then can you watch the frying for me? I've never fried food before, so I don't know how." Eric's indifferent response irritated me, but I knew arguing wouldn't help. So I had to stop frying and go to my stepfather. This kind of thing happens almost daily. Despite not helping with caregiving, they were extremely opposed to getting external help. I can't take care of my father-in-law properly by myself, so I'd like to hire a caregiver, I suggested at the dinner table with Eric and Jen. "No way. A caregiver would come into our house?" "Right. I can't handle having a stranger here. What if something gets stolen? Can you take responsibility?" Eric immediately shot down the idea. How about a day service? They help with bathing and provide activities. It would be good stimulation for my father-in-law, and I'd appreciate the time to do housework, I continued. When I suggested this, Jen shook her head. Why should we pay for caregiving when we have someone to do it for free at home? That's just a waste of money. I hate wasting money more than anything, right, sugar darling? Exactly, Mom, Eric chimed in. I wanted to say the same thing. If you get what Mom's saying, just shut up and eat. I couldn't believe their words. I felt anger towards them for seeing me as nothing but free caregiving labor. Around this time, my own father was hospitalized long-term due to illness. I was worried about him, but I couldn't leave my caregiving duties. My stepfather, I said, I know you're worried about your father. It's okay if you go to him. But Eric and Jen strongly opposed it, so I couldn't even visit him properly. As time passed, my father's condition worsened rapidly, and he passed away. I attended my father's funeral, but even then, neither Jen nor Eric showed any sympathy. My father passed away, and I have to go to his funeral, I said. Oh, really? But we're going on a hot spring trip, so the timing is bad. We're not canceling the trip. This is our way of honoring our parents. I'm so lucky to have such a caring son. I love you, Eric, Jen replied. With that conversation, Eric and Jen happily went on their planned spa trip. Even though Jen was my mother-in-law, my husband Eric should have attended my father's funeral. I thought Eric understood, but he didn't. It became clear that Eric didn't care about me at all, which hit me hard, especially with the grief of losing my father. Are you all right? Oh, Dad? I'm truly sorry for causing you so much trouble. Go to your father's last moments. I'll manage somehow while you're gone. Don't worry and go. Thank you so much. Thanks to my father-in-law's concern, I could attend my father's funeral. Seeing my father in the casket, I was overwhelmed with grief and anger at Eric and Jen for not being there for me. Even after they returned from their trip, neither offered any words of comfort. One day, I found a hotel card in Eric's suit pocket. From the membership card's usage history, I learned that he stayed at this hotel every weekend, which made me suspicious of him. While dealing with these feelings, my father-in-law also passed away. I was running around preparing for his funeral, but Eric and Jen seemed indifferent. On the night the funeral finally ended, Eric smirked and handed me a document. It was a completed divorce paper. I'm having a baby with Mom. Here's the divorce paper. Now that Dad's gone, you're no longer needed. They saw me as just free caregiving labor, disposable. After my father-in-law's death, but I wasn't going to let that happen. What? I'm not getting divorced. Because I took out a file containing documents. It was about a debt. Because you still haven't repaid the loan you took from my father. Eric's face twisted in frustration. After my father-in-law fell ill, and Eric took over the company, its performance plummeted. Running a business wasn't easy, and the bank drastically reduced the loan amount, deeming it too risky. Desperate, Eric borrowed a large sum from my wealthy father. My father couldn't refuse his daughter's husband and lent him the money. With that money, Eric managed to keep the company afloat. Until you repay the loan to my father, don't think about divorcing me. Do you really want to stay with me that badly? You're pathetic. I've been in love with Mom all along. Stop making excuses and get divorced already. I said I'm not divorcing you. Don't misunderstand. I want to divorce as much as you do, but I'm keeping the marriage to ensure you repay the loan. If you want a divorce, pay off the loan quickly. Eric looked confused by my cold tone. You say repay, but your father is dead. The debt should be canceled. It's not like he can use money in the afterlife. The debt was transferred to me. I had the paperwork done while he was alive, anticipating a day like this. What? You were too well prepared. When I showed him the documents, Eric looked frustrated. He crossed his arms and thought for a long time before suddenly yelling, "It doesn't matter. I want to be with Mom no matter what obstacles we faced. Mom and I have overcome them together. We've loved each other for a long time." "Oh, really?" Surprised by Eric's sudden outburst, I responded in a daze which seemed to ignite his feelings. "I've loved Mom ever since Dad remarried her. I thought I should give up this burning love. To cut off these feelings, I married you." Eric, looking like a tragic hero lost in his own world, continued, "I chose you because you seemed easy. I liked that you were timid and easy to manipulate. A little effort, and you fell for me easily. I thought I could just give up on Mom and build a happy family with you. Oh, but my love for Mom only grew stronger day by day. Forbidden love burns brightly like Romeo and Juliet. This is unstoppable love, the true love." Eric, reveling in his own story, looked at me with a determined expression. His eyes were unnervingly bright. "I'll sell the company and use the money to repay the debt. Dad's inheritance and insurance should cover our living expenses for a while. You were entrusted with the company your father cherished, and you're just going to let it go so easily. It's because you threatened not to divorce me unless I repay the debt, even though it was his own fault." Eric blamed me, but I ignored him. Eventually, Eric did sell the company. With the proceeds, the debt was fully repaid, and I divorced him without any regrets. A few months later, I was tasked with sorting through my father-in-law's belongings. It was supposed to be Eric's responsibility as his son, but both he and Jen refused to do it. While quietly organizing the belongings, I found a diary. In it, my father-in-law had written shocking entries. He suspected that Jen was trying to poison him by mixing toxic plants into his meals. He'd also mentioned the location of a hidden safe with security camera footage. I found and opened the safe. Inside, I discovered tapes from a security camera. Upon reviewing the footage, it clearly showed Jen attempting to mix poisonous plants into my father-in-law's food. Armed with this evidence, I went to the apartment where Eric and Jen were living. "I've come to inform you that I have proof that Jen was poisoning my father-in-law's food." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. I said I have proof. I'm sending copies of the video and the diary to the police and the insurance company." As I calmly informed them, Jen's face turned red with anger. "How could you do this? You wouldn't understand, being a useless woman who can't have children. Raising a child costs money. If you do this, we might have to return the insurance money." Despite Jen's rage, I remained calm. "Is the child in your belly really Eric's?" When I voiced my suspicion, Eric looked puzzled, but Jen's face went pale, and she fell silent. But I had no reason to stop. I've been suspicious of Eric and Jen's relationship for a while, so I hired a private investigator to look into them. Feeling uneasy about the unusual closeness between Eric and his stepmother, I had secretly hired a detective to investigate. During the investigation, I found out that Jen was having an affair with one of Eric's subordinates. They frequently met at a hotel. "What? Is this true? Why didn't you say anything?" "Of course it's true. I knew about it when we divorced, but I didn't care about you two anymore, so I kept quiet." Saying this, I showed the photos of Jen walking closely with the other man and entering a hotel. Jen, pale and trembling, was confronted by an enraged Eric. "You greedy old hack. I didn't know you had another man, old hack. You always said you loved me, your beautiful older lady. Shut up. That love died a long time ago. Living with you was never fun. And why didn't you deny having another man first? Well, that's with evidence like this. You can't deny it, can you? You're the worst, trying to poison Dad's food. As Eric's voice filled with disgust, Jen finally lost it. What are you talking about? You were the one who got the poison. Jen's loud outburst left Eric speechless. He opened and closed his mouth but said nothing. Poor Eric. At that moment, the police arrived with a warrant, ending their chaotic fight. As Eric and Jen were taken away, they glared at each other, and I couldn't help but laugh, thinking about their so-called true love. The thorough police investigation revealed the entire truth. Jen hadn't been lying. Out of desperation from Eric's computer history, it was confirmed that he had searched for and purchased toxic plants. With the video evidence left by my father-in-law, Eric and Jen were both arrested on charges of insurance fraud and murder. Jen was detained after giving birth. A DNA test after the birth revealed that the child Jen had wasn't related to Eric at all. Naturally, Eric was infuriated when he found out right before being taken away. Jen, who was nearly pinned with all the blame, harbored anger towards Eric. Their trial turned into a horribly ugly spectacle. I was forced by Eric to put the toxic plants into the food. I had no choice. Our intimate encounters were also not consensual. She initiated the encounters. I never instructed her to use toxic plants. She must have used my computer account to buy the toxic plants without my knowledge. Their mutual accusations only worsened their standing with the judge. Despite it being their first offense, the gravity of insurance fraud and murder led to severe guilty verdicts without any leniency. Eric and Jen's betrayal, mistreatment of my father-in-law, and exploitation of his company finally caught up with them. Eric, now behind bars, had sold the company to repay the debt to me and had no savings or job. Jen, by the time she served her sentence, would be much older and had no experience beyond being a housewife since her marriage. With no one left to rely on, both Eric and Jen faced a tough road ahead even after serving their sentences. As for me, after parting ways with my in-laws, I moved to the countryside alone. With my mother long gone and my father recently deceased, I had no family home to return to. Remembering my lifelong dream of a slow, peaceful life, I decided to settle in a rural village. In this village, time moved slowly. I lived a serene life, growing just enough vegetables for myself and enjoying hobbies like painting and pottery. This idyllic lifestyle healed my long-standing emotional wounds. Occasionally, I returned to the city to visit the graves of my parents and father-in-law. But the countryside suited me better. I had good relations with my neighbors, and thankfully, the villagers were kind to a single woman like me. In this village, I decided to enjoy the second chapter of my life leisurely.